Hi, good afternoon, and welcome to this tech industry edition of CIO Leadership Live. I'm your host, Mary Fran Johnson, CEO of Mary Fran Johnson Media and the former editor-in-chief of CIO Magazine. Since November 2017, this video show and podcast has been produced by the editors of CIO.com and the digital media division of Foundry, an IDG company. Today's episode is sponsored by Ivanti, a global software provider specializing in bringing IT and security together in one platform. Because when IT and security break down silos, it gives employees a much more secure, productive digital experience. Headquartered in South Jordan, Utah, Ivanti's solutions include service management, endpoint management and security, exposure management, and network security itself. Visit Ivanti's website to learn more. And if you stay tuned with us here, you're going to learn a lot more about Ivanti as a company and as a tech industry player. My guest today is Bob Grazioli, who is the CIO of Ivanti. Bob joined Ivanti in June 2020 as the Vice President of Software as a Service Operations, and then expanded his role to CIO in 2021. With more than 3,000 employees working across 23 countries, Ivanti's mission is to make secure remote work possible for its more than 40,000 customers. As the CIO, Bob is responsible for all of Ivanti's global IT systems and its SaaS operations as well, including the integration of multiple acquisitions in the past few years. Prior to joining the company, he was serving as the VP of SaaS Strategy and Operations at BMC Software, and before that, as EVP and Global Head of SAP's Partner Cloud ecosystem. Bob brings 30 plus years of global experience in business technology that spans financial services, banking, and the software industry. He's been involved in some of the biggest software acquisitions in our industry over the last decade, and also responsible for some of the biggest SaaS offerings out there today. At Ivanti, Bob also has oversight of the company's Customer Zero program, where he's taking SaaS operations to the next level by leveraging his own team's direct experience with Ivanti products. Bob, welcome.
Well, thank you. Quite an introduction. Thank you.
Well, you're very welcome. It sounds like you're a very, very busy guy, so I'm glad you could find time to be with us today. Let's dive in and talk a little bit more about your CIO role, which at a tech industry player like Ivanti, it calls for a unique mix of technical and business and managerial skills, especially in the way, and I know we're going to talk about this a lot more, the CIO and the Chief Security Officer roles are so tightly coordinated. Tell us more about how all that works and how and why this role is so unique.
Yeah, I mean, even more so tightly coordinated, the CISO role actually rolls up into the CIO org, right? So it's all really under one organizational structure. And, you know, at first there was some, say, gaps in the way we kind of looked at security. I mean, we have IT security, corporate security, application security, and bringing all that together is very unique because we're able to really take a 360 view of everything that's happening across our entire enterprise and product. And because you mentioned we use a lot of our own Ivanti products within, Ivanti and the IT organization, we have unique insights into how security works within the product and how it should be applied within Ivanti itself. And having this in the organization, having the insights coming from his tooling, his organization, or his team, applying that directly into IT helps us really mature what we need to have to secure Ivanti and then project that out to our customers as our products develop. So we call that the Customer Zero program, or part of the Customer Zero program. Very effective, right, in providing that next level of insight that we believe our developers need, right, or product managers need to understand what our customers are looking for in terms of our products. And obviously, I have that responsibility to make sure Ivanti, from a corporate point of view, has the highest level of security, and that security isolates Ivanti from, let's face it, we are a target out in the industry for some nefarious actors, and that has happened. So we have to have a heightened layer and organizational view of how we implement security, both from an internal point of view and product point of view.
Okay. Okay. That makes sense. You had also mentioned that as a PE company, you have to do a lot of integration work. You have to master data and manage it into the system, and that you're actually using a pretty sophisticated approach to how you do back office operations.
Yeah, let's face it. Integrating any company is not easy. There's no manual right off the shelf that tells you how to integrate a company. You look at a company, you look at your strategy around synergies, how it all is supposed to come together. But
Mm-hmm.
what we've learned over the years is that data should be your focus. We have taken up a program about a year or so ago and looked at what we needed to master, key data records or information within the company, like product information, account information, contact information.
Mm-hmm.
Once we were able to master that, right, and stamp that as what we believe that should be in terms of information and how that information should flow into our back office systems. When we do an acquisition, then we're taking a look at their processes, taking a look at what data represents those processes, and easily really mapping it into what we've mastered.
Mm-hmm.
That makes us really efficient at transitioning their processes and what they need to execute their business into Ivanti.
Yeah.
And that helps with all kinds of leverage in terms of, hey, we have a synergy target of X. We need to hit that target in X number of months to be accretive in any type of acquisition we want to make.
Okay.
So having the ability to integrate something quickly, efficiently, and have that business just roll into Ivanti, mastering the data, to us is the secret sauce. And that has worked fairly well for us over the years.
Okay, great. You'd mentioned we passed over mentioning customers, and I wondered how often do you get out in the field often enough where you feel like you have a pulse on what the customers are most concerned about? Although I suppose given the portion of the industry that you're in, it's probably security conversations you have with us. But tell me more about that. When you talk with customers, what is top of mind for them? I mean, beyond talking about Ivanti's products, of course.
Yeah, well, obviously we stress SaaS, right? That's our direction.
Mm-hmm.
And being CIO and being in charge of our SaaS teams, it is very important I get in front of our customers and reassure them about the service, because it's software as a service. And obviously, let me put my CIO hat on. If I'm thinking about going to SaaS, the first thing I'm thinking about is I'm giving up my run and operate to another company.
Yeah.
They're going to provide this higher level of service than I currently provide, hopefully.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. So I have to really dig into what that really represents. So I'm on a lot of calls with customers talking about how we implement our run and operate, how we deploy our product. And then, yes, most importantly, it's about the security. We're always reviewing our SOC 2. We're looking at ISO. We're looking at exactly how on a regular basis we're doing scans for vulnerability in the environment and making sure that it's properly, obviously, patched, remediated, so that we're not having issues, obviously, with security or any other breach that might impact our customers.
Okay. One of the things you mentioned when we talked earlier was that your mantra tends to be around continuous improvement. How is that? That sounded very familiar to me in the many years when I've talked with CIOs, that there's always constant change, managing change, improving, innovating. Those are kind of keystones of the CIO role. What is it about your work at Ivanti that feels different? Is there more of an intensity on it, or is it pretty much a continuation of what every CIO out there is concerned about?
No, I mean, working, in many different industries and across, many different types of organizational structures, I would say that, my mantra and what I insist on in my organization is very simple. I always insist on people looking and understanding how relevant they are in anything they're doing, right?
Mm-hmm.
In their role, in the way they're working with our customers and so on. So, looking at your relevancy will automatically, initiate improvement. initiate change or at least make you aware of change.
Okay.
So staying and being aware of what's relevant, I think is for me, that's the magic that I try to instill in my organization and how I approach, dealing with everything that, I have responsibility for. It's all about
Okay.
being ready.
All right. Well, and one of the other things you mentioned was that you take a very aggressive approach inside Avanti on managing IT. Now, that sounded to me like a very tight budget, but I would imagine a lot of our CIO listeners and out in other industries tend to think that if you work for a tech industry company, well, the sky's the limit. You can have whatever you need because, this is our business. So talk about your budget. And when you say that you manage it very aggressively, what do you mean?
Well, as you mentioned earlier, obviously we do a lot of acquisitions, and
Yeah.
because of that, there is a very tight line on what we're doing with margins and being accretive when we have an acquisition. So it really is not a matter of tight budgets. It's a matter of being sensible about what we need to spend money on, right?
Mm-hmm.
So we absolutely are laser focused on what's important for us to spend money on. For instance, like this year, obviously the whole talk is about AI, right?
Yes.
So when we look across our budget, we're looking at, hey, what percentage of our budget now should be going towards AI?
Mm-hmm.
And we start to, turn to that and we say, okay, well, this is the budget. So we're a little light. So what can we trim here to move
Yeah.
there and continue to evolve what we think we need to do with AI? But budgets are extremely important for us to manage because don't forget, my organization spans quite a few different disciplines, right? We have SaaS ops, which is SRE, DevOps, we have security, we have traditional IT support. I have my AI team now.
Mm-hmm.
We also do a lot of customer zero work, which is around how we're expressing a real ROI, as we mentioned earlier, around our own products. So
Right.
we have a lot to, spend on in order to be relevant as
Mm-hmm.
we continue to evolve some of the technology that we need to have in the organization.
Right. Okay. And you're not doing all this work with thousands of people in your IT department. I believe you told me you have about 200 in your staff. How are those organized? I find that other CIOs are always really interested in how other IT departments, no matter how broad or narrow their scope, how are you organized? It used to be such an easy question. It would be a plan, run, and operate, or plan, run, build. But it's gotten so much more complex. So,
Well, I think I have a very interesting opportunity when I came to Avanti in taking over both CIO IT role and the SaaS operations role. We were able to leverage that customer facing infrastructure team, right,
okay.
and the IT infrastructure team. So we brought a lot of teams together and leverage that infrastructure experience, DevOps experience, IT
Mhm.
support experience. So we really are bringing together two sides of the organization, both the customer facing SaaS side of the organization and the IT. Bringing that
Mhm.
together has really helped us manage budget, become more efficient. And I would say the biggest advantage has been the insights that we've been able to bring together to tightly manage and improve how we're using things across both disciplines. Because don't forget, on the SaaS side, we're managing a service and we're always looking to improve the service, but we're also conscious of the margins we need to keep in order
Sure.
to be, making money in that side of the business. So having the ability to have all that insight into how the product's being used
Mhm.
and then applying that to the product itself and the services we provide to the customer, it's really helped us manage budget and create an organization that's relevant. And I think our teams love the idea that they have the ability to cross the line. They
Yeah.
can go from SaaS, they can go to IT, they can go to security. So keeping that fresh for employees and giving them the opportunity, right, to kind of cross themselves into different tech stacks, different tooling, really helps the organization stay fresh and relevant as they continue to develop their career and help Avanti move forward.
That's cool because I remember when we talked just a minute ago, you mentioned DevOps, But have you transitioned DevOps over to Dev Security Ops, DevSecOps?
Absolutely. I mean, we might get into secure by design a little later, but
Hmm.
yeah, absolutely. We're focused on establishing these team pods, right? And in the team pods, there's a cross section of technology folks, around security, DevOps,
Hmm.
SRE, product managers, even. So we've really embraced, bringing a group of people that understand different disciplines of what we're trying to manage, build, right, and
Hmm.
deploy service, and having them share their ideas, share their experiences, and bringing that into either the product or the way we're servicing our customers.
Yes. Well, and you mentioned secure by design, and I think we probably should spend a little time on that because that is a very big deal, right? And
Absolutely.
I know you mentioned it as one of your strategic priorities going into 2025. So talk about that a little more. When we talked about it earlier, you said we signed our name in security blood. It sounded a little dramatic, but
Well,
then
when
again, the
you
government is involved, so
exactly, yeah, yeah,
yeah,
we were one of the, I think, 200 plus companies that now have signed a
yeah,
pledge
okay,
that we will implement secure by design as a practice in the
right.
way we code and software at Ivanti. So we
Hmm.
did it. Um, Now, look, it's not something that just showed up yesterday. It's been around a while, and
Sure.
we have been practicing, secure by design, but maybe not as, in the same framework, as you will, that we're now signed up for. So what we've done is we've taken a look at the secure by design principles, and we looked at how that should be applied across all of our product development. Our CISO has now implemented a strategy, and I mentioned earlier, we've established these security pods. And
Hmm.
within the security pods, before anything is actually developed, designed, the security pods are formed, and that design principle is brought to bear on anything we're thinking about developing. So our
Okay.
architects, DBAs, and so on, before they're thinking about anything or bringing in a third-party product to integrate into our product, we're looking at how that needs to be secured.
Hmm.
So it become the number one priority before any code is written, that we have that design embedded in what we're thinking about.
Yeah.
It wasn't easy. It was
Well,
not easy.
and along those lines of it wasn't easy, give us an example of a before and after, something that has changed for the better or maybe for the worse and then had to be fixed. But what we talked about continuous improvement and change and all that. In a before and after scenario, what does that look like in kind of the day-to-day life of your development teams?
Well, again, before there were security principles that obviously were part of our normal development
For
cycle,
sure.
our pipeline for delivery, and so on. But having now a dedicated team,
Hmm.
dedicated, looking at all of the principles that need to be absolutely adhered to,
Hmm.
because let's be honest with each other. We have a very broad portfolio of software, and
Sure.
there's tight timelines. There's all kinds of pressure to move things along.
Hmm.
And sometimes when you do things by committee, lots of times you'll evaluate something and say, you know what, I'm looking at that and I think the risk is low, so let's move on, right?
Right.
Let's keep going. Now that evaluation has a higher level of focus, so that if that was a 2 before, it's now a 10 for us, and we can't move on. It needs to be fixed before we go any further, or
Yeah.
we need to develop it this way now, because the other way, it left a little too much risk there for us to continue to do that. So
Yeah.
it's really increased the bar, right? Made it more of a focus for everyone
Hmm.
in the organization, to pay attention to what the risk is if we do this as opposed to that. All right.
Yeah.
So I think it really has changed the culture, the mindset, and the
Hmm.
focus of our teams on what truly we need to have in the design of our products. And look, when you sign something, as you said, with the United States government, and by the way,
Okay.
there's some teeth around it. there's a process where they're checking, they're evaluating whether or not we're adhering to a
Yes.
lot of the framework that's there. So it's no joke. You need to embrace this. You need to have everybody on board, and it is a full team effort to make sure that we are complying and staying within the framework that's been designed. And don't forget, this is an international standard now, right? There's 17 or 18 other countries that are around this. So we're an international company. We're trying to sell our software everywhere, right?
Yeah.
SaaS. So now when we go into a lot of these countries, they're asking us about these things.
Sure.
Are we doing it, right? How much have you really embraced it? So you talked about, me interfacing with customers earlier.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, it's the ISO, it's the SOC, but now it's the secure by design, right? How they're shifting all those questions further left about the design of the product now, instead of looking at, when you talk about SOC and ISO and these standards, it's a little bit more operational, the operational controls and what you're doing to manage the run and operate. Yes. When you talking about secure by design, you're really shifted the discussion further left. And that's all about how we're even building software now, right?
Have you found that it's easier to get the business side on board with all this? Because a lot of times the concerns from the business side are that, oh, Bob, all these regulations are great, but aren't they going to slow things down? When are we going to get our new stuff? And that's such a push-pull between IT and security operations always. And I don't know whether this has made it any better or worse, although secure by design is at least really clear. When you talk about ISO, regular people in the world are probably trying to think, what does that stand for again? But at least secure by design is pretty clear English. So have you found more support on the business side than maybe we could have crossed our fingers about?
No, I think that's true, right? Obviously the business, we have a big deal. We got to get this done. And, that's the normal, conversation. But I think over the past few years, the fear of security has now penetrated, the business, because they're seeing companies having to pay millions and millions in ransomware, downtime. Look at the CrowdStrike incident and so on, right? Yes. So I think that fear has changed everything. So yes, in fact, in our in a lot of our executive meetings, absolutely, when we talk security, everybody kind of sits up a little bit more and wants to make sure that what they're selling, what they're telling customers, right? Some of our SLAs, because don't forget, when you have SaaS, those SLAs are extremely important to the customer. Yes. And in those SLAs, downtime, performance, security, if you breach those SLAs, you're paying your customer back penalties, right? Credits and so on. So it's now part of the conversation to make sure, did we check the box on security? And if we haven't, let's delay it. Mm-hmm. Let's delay it. And I would say this, we've tried to make velocity a standard for software delivery.
Okay.
And I think that's now come back to haunt us in a lot of ways, because that's where the shortcuts started to happen, sure. Right? Because I want to move fast. I want to get this out there. Look how fast I deliver this, once a day, once a month, and so on. Mm-hmm. Now we're looking back at some of those practices, fail fast. Wait a minute. You don't want to fail. Okay.
Yeah. So, we'd rather not fail with the security things very much.
But these were mantras that you heard as part of, a change. But now, because of, what we're seeing, people take advantage of, right? Mm-hmm. They're taking advantage of things that we said, hey, let's let that go. We'll fix it later.
Right. Let's not let perfect be the enemy of the good, or something along those lines.
But that's changed the tone, right? Yeah. So that people, if you said, I need to delay this to fix that, that's changed the tone that says, okay, let's do that. Let's take our time. Let's get it right. And let's make sure we don't, damage the business, or, create a situation where, the perception in the market is that our software doesn't work, or it's not secure, or whatever. So it's definitely making people think twice about what's important.
That's actually, that could be a really good trend if we can stick with it, because I know that we've gotten into that velocity. Just get it out the door, and then we'll patch it later. We'll fix whatever went wrong. I've had conversations with CIOs over the years about frustrations with SaaS providers in general, in that they would just get the newest upgrade or the newest changes. They'd get them all finally working, everybody settled down, understand what the new stuff, and then there'd be another upgrade. And it was exhausting for a lot of IT staffs out there. It just,
Well, yeah, I mean, think about it. The change management went to the
yeah.
waste. That's another,
Mhm.
another casualty of velocity, right?
Yeah.
The velocity of change really put the CIO in a bad spot, because all of the change management practices that they might have, considered that in their in-house
Mhm.
run and operate went out the window,
Yeah.
right? Because you became now a servant of the SaaS provider, right? And they said, hey, this week you're getting an upgrade. Well, wait a minute, what's in the upgrade? How is
Yeah.
it going to affect my customers? So all that went out the window. But now I feel it every day. Customers saying, "Hey, can we slow down the release? I don't think I
Mhm.
could handle that release." And I'm going to, from the other side of the equation, what wasn't really factored was the amount of tech that might create in the product and for our
Ah,
engineering. Okay,
okay.
so it really is a double-edged sword there, because yeah, the velocity was impacting the customer,
Mhm.
and then that velocity also created potential tech debt, because, as you put more things in the product and you are trying to find out what adoption looks like,
Mhm.
if that adoption wasn't as, exciting to the customer as, you would think, we eventually need to pull that out. Why? Because you can't have these bloated, systems running in a SaaS service, because that just costs more money for us to run and operate. Now,
Yeah.
look, with microservices and containers and so on, that helps a little bit, right?
Yeah.
But at the end of the day, tech debt, that's an evil that you need to control. Otherwise, it could really hurt the service and hurt your
Mhm.
profitability going forward.
Yeah. Is dealing with tech debt or core modernization, does that make your top priority list going into 25?
Well, I would say, because we do a lot of acquisitions, tech debt is always a top priority, because,
Because you
we
inherit the tech debt when you acquire, of course.
exactly, and
Yes.
that tech debt is looked at as inefficiency, cost, right? Things
Yeah.
we need to get out in order to improve our margins and profitability. So, and
Mhm.
and the performance, and the way, obviously at some point we acquire software so we can integrate it, cross sell
Mhm.
it, and so on. So you want to make sure tech debt is definitely one of your priorities to look at. Try to, put some cycles, some sprints together to eliminate it as much as you can.
Mhm. Okay. Now, I want to circle back and talk about two things next. One, I'm so proud of us. We've been talking for nearly a half an hour, and we only mentioned AI once.
Ah,
So, I want to go back and I want to talk about that AI team that you put together. What are they doing? How big is the team? Is it cross-functional with business and technology, organization folks involved? What is your AI team actually up to? So tell us about that.
well, first of all, I'm really proud of the way Ivanti has approached AI.
Hmm.
We approached it, first with governance, absolute, and that governance really exists within our legal department,
Hmm.
and they have done an exceptional job of looking at data privacy. How, what is the ethical way for us to look at AI within the business, and so on. So we started there.
Hmm. Yes.
From there, we evaluated, what AI tools should be important to us. Obviously, the co-pilots are out there, Einsteins, the Jules. There's so many
Hmm.
of them, and really, my strategy was to. I did not want to have 10 AIs, running across the enterprise for people to use. Right? That's just
Right.
not going to work. So, is there an Uber AI? Uber AI. But
Hmm.
then you get into the discussion about how do you manage the data that AI needs to have in order to be
Mm.
effective, right? Is there a
Yeah.
singularity that you need to create around data so that you have an efficient AI? So
Okay.
we created a team, an AI team, and this is a cross-functional set of people. I took people out of our SaaS ops
Mm-hmm.
organization, IT, security. We have some business people in it. And we started developing use cases around what we thought would be an efficient way for us to initially look at AI.
Okay.
And believe it or not, we've developed in that pod about 700 use cases for AI.
Wow.
Okay. Yeah.
Wow. Yeah.
Impressive amount of use cases.
Mm-hmm.
Um, now, I don't know what that means in terms of whether or not we're inefficient or efficient or whatever, but there's a lot of ways for us to put AI into the business and become obviously more efficient, more productive, et cetera. So 700.
And
Now,
when you say that, does that mean you've got 700 use cases that are now in production or operational? Or hang on,
let me dial that number back a little bit.
hold
So
that thought. Yeah.
hold that. So
Mm-hmm.
when you look at the use cases, then the problem was we had to look across all these different AIs like Copilot, et cetera, and
Yeah.
say, where's the best place for that AI to live, right? Or somebody
Mm-hmm.
to use it. We eventually decided that we should have our own AI, and we developed something called Ivy,
Okay.
right? So AI is officially Avanti's Uber AI,
Oh,
where our
mhm.
customers, internal customers, go to use AI. All
Oh,
right.
interesting. Okay.
So we're not, they're not directly in Copilot. Now, I don't want to say that Copilot or something from Microsoft is not being used today, because let's face it, Microsoft is embedding Copilot in all the Office products. You can't miss that little,
Sure.
I don't even know what that is, that little squiggly thing they have out there now.
Yes. Yes.
So it's there. But we encourage our users to go to Ivy, where we have a certain amount of governance there, right?
Mm-hmm.
Which allows us to obviously control access to certain data, permissions, who's seeing what, and so on. So it really creates a nice interface for people to go to that allows for our corporate governance around AI and
Mm-hmm.
what we believe the top use cases are for productivity within the company to be properly leveraged. Okay,
Okay.
so we can see the productivity that we're getting through Ivy. Whereas, what we're finding in Copilot is, yeah, people are using Word or PowerPoint and Copilot, but we're not able to track the real productivity that comes from that. We're seeing, okay, I can create a PowerPoint presentation
Mm-hmm.
with AI. Okay, was that 10 seconds or was that 2 hours? We haven't been able to really collapse that into productivity yet. Okay.
Okay.
And we're working with Microsoft and others to capture that. And I'll give you a good example.
Okay.
In our customer success organization, we did a very extensive analysis on how our customer success agents were dealing with various issues, right? And
Mm-hmm.
dealing with accounts, right? To make sure that obviously we're getting the highest level of support, how they felt
Mm-hmm.
about product and so on, or even new opportunities. When we looked at how they were able to engage the customer and what functions they needed to perform, we found that using, in this case, it was Copilot,
Mm-hmm.
we brought back in a 40-hour work week, right? We brought back almost 30 hours. 30 hours. Now, that's because there is a lot of creating PowerPoints, working in Word, right? Some Excel, so it was a high use of Microsoft products that with AI embedded there, it was able to really, really accelerate what outcomes they needed by using those products. So
Right.
we're seeing high levels of productivity in some of the Office products with Copilot, but we believe that with Ivy and the way we're integrating Ivy into Salesforce, we use Workday, we use SAP. So having an Uber AI that integrates into our enterprise and is encapsulating all the data that's in that enterprise is much more effective for Ivanti in the way we're developing AI. And so our AI team is building connectors into these enterprise
I see. I
products,
see. Yes.
right? Creating a singularity around the data we need, right, for our customers to use AI, and so that they can quickly gather information, query a particular, a sales opportunity,
Hmm.
a particular financial report. Because when we look to, this is an interesting statistic. At one point, we had thousands of reports that were just being created in the company. I wanted to see this and I wanted to see that and I wanted to see, and that creates a big overhead, right? Because there's a lot of
Sure.
data, a lot of infrastructure required for reporting.
There's your legacy systems hard at work.
Exactly,
Mhm.
exactly. And believe me, a lot of people don't realize that expense. When you drill into that expense for the storage of that data, for all the compute required to produce these reports, maintaining the queries, the DBA infrastructure that's required to manage the indexes and the performance and so on, it's a lot. Now,
Yeah.
taking a look at those reports and what our customers were looking for, AI eliminated 40% of that reporting because they were only looking for maybe some, really
Very specific.
small part of that report or that, little item of information that might have been,
Hmm.
six pages down in the report that they were looking for, right? So AI really allowed for a much more um, focused ability to extract information and get information quickly without generating all these reams of information out of this reporting
Yeah.
infrastructure that we created. So
Right.
that's been a tremendous benefit too for us.
Well, and I'm sure you remember this too, because you've been like me, you've been around the industry a while. Do you remember executive information systems, EISs? That is like kind of the holy grail where you can just dive into this golden mountain of data and get the information you need. And you can do it really quickly. And AI seems to be I don't know, a lot of companies I think are using it to help their own capabilities to sort through all of those mountains of data, which are not all gold, as it turns out.
Yeah, and right, and back then, you had an army of people too trying to get all that to happen, right?
That's true. That's
And
true. You would have had 2,000 people working for you then, right?
well, I don't look at the number anymore because, Microsoft, I think, just came out with something interesting now. They're going to have an AI agent that they're going to sell, right?
Hmm.
Specific to a particular, business or something. You
Hmm.
know, when we
Ah,
started this, I said I looked at AI as an employee.
okay.
I didn't see it as really a tech tool. If you because as we tried to bring Ivanti employees on board with AI, education was very important. We
Hmm.
have monthly education sessions for employees on AI to educate them, because look, it will impact people's jobs. There's
Hmm.
you cannot believe that AI will have some impact on the way people do their job or
Hmm.
what that job is. We see it. So
Sure.
education and making sure people have the awareness so that they could adjust their relevancy, right, in either their job or what they feel their importance is to the company is absolute and important when you start to implement an AI program, right?
Okay.
I
Yeah.
really
Makes
want to
sense.
put the employee first as we transition in this technology, and I've been really focused on that, and that's why too we have the AI group where I can rotate people into that group, right?
Hmm.
Someone that's maybe, a DBA, we put them in the AI pod because they could help maybe with different insights in how we're building our data marts or how our models are being built and so on. Or they might want to be a prompt engineer or, assist in the way we're looking at our whole AI infrastructure. And an important thing for companies to start to look at is the way this is being monetized is through these
Hmm.
tokens.
Oh,
Okay.
okay.
So, it's kind of like, you start using it, right? And then the meter starts to run. So,
Hmm.
all of a sudden, a $1,000 expense turned into $10,000. Okay. $100,000 because, as people do more and more prompt engineering and AI becomes more ubiquitous in the enterprise,
Yeah.
token usage is going to just ramp up. So you have to pay attention. And that's why we felt Ivy was a good approach for us because we could monitor and control some of that token usage that's required, obviously, as you start to use AI.
Mhm.
So that's another big reason why we created the AI team again, to make sure we were really looking at everything that had to be managed when we had a full AI program rolled out to the enterprise.
Okay. That remind me when you're talking about that, the best of breed versus the universal, the ERP like systems. That is another pendulum that goes back and forth in our
Oh yeah,
industry. And
absolutely.
I'm wondering, is AI driving the trend toward one end of the pendulum or the other? Are we going to end up with more individual best of breed apps again, or
That's a
are
great
other
yeah.
are other companies going to look to create an Uber, maybe create or buy an Uber AI that handles most of this for them? Where do you,
Yeah,
what do you think?
you're spot on. I mean, that's the way I feel about it. I see the pendulum coming back to, again, I said a singularity, right? Because
Mhm.
if you think about it, why should I have now all these different data stores out there? And, again, I'll mention, Workday or SAP or
Mhm.
Salesforce or whatever. And then you have all the middleware that's doing the transit and some of the processing there when you have, this best of breed approach. So yes,
Mm.
to me, if you're looking at, the future and where AI needs to, be, having some singularity of data, and if that means a ERP and maybe it evolves to something else, but yeah, I think that will push us back, especially as a CIO. I'm looking for simplicity, right? I'm looking for a better way to look at my data, and let's face it, I need to secure that data. And
Yeah.
having data, all over my enterprise is not a good look, right? It's not a good way,
Yeah.
you know. Did somebody need that, or did someone get access to this? And you're constantly playing whack-a-mole with who's
Yeah.
access to what.
Hmm.
So yes, I do believe maybe the ERP, or going back to a singularity
Hmm.
of a either application and data will help definitely simplify the enterprise and give you a better opportunity to have a more coherent model as you start deploying AI in your organization.
Yeah.
So I agree with you 100% on that.
Well, and that point you made about the importance of staying on top of employee concerns and worries and paranoia about AI, you'd mentioned that you don't call anybody data scientists anymore, and that encourages a more inclusive sort of feel about, yeah, you can come and join the AI team. Is it that much like if I was over in the, say I'm in your communications department and I want to learn more about AI, do I go and join the AI team? I wouldn't bring a lot to it. I have to warn you, but
Well, you would say that if you walked in day one, but I think if you left in day 10, you'd
oh,
probably
I
be
would
be in a good place.
I would
Yeah,
have taken
because
lots of notes. Yeah. Mhm.
yeah, well, lots of notes, and I think there's a lot of hands-on work that is done in the group too, right?
Okay.
There's people that the extra level of insight. No, but look, I think we have to all understand, and you can't look at, you mentioned silos. It's not only a
Hmm.
security silo, right? You have to break down all silos, right? You can't
Sure.
think of people as DBAs anymore, network people or system administrators anymore. And the reason why that's going to be absolutely true is because of AI. Because AI is bringing everything together, right? It's bringing all those. Years ago, we always wanted to connect the dots, right? You connect the dots, you get the big view of what really is happening, and you can make decisions, and you could really be efficient. AI is
Mhm.
doing that for us today.
Yeah.
Okay, so you know, I was joking with my team the other day. I said, look, I'm going to go out and get every one of you guys an AI assistant. Okay, and it's true. I think we're going that direction. So what that allows you to do is I can take a network person and make them a DBA because they can have their DBA assistant help them, right?
Ah, I see. Oh, so
Right?
they can learn as they go. That sort of
Learn as
thing.
they go, and
Yeah.
because the AI assistant will establish at least a baseline for what that job is.
Yeah.
Okay, because and then hopefully this new person will contribute new insights into the way the job could be done, or how to make it better. Because I find
Mhm.
that people that are coming from another place always have that different perspective, that can make a difference at some point because they have a different angle. Angles are important. You got to have some angles, and those angles help us be more efficient, look at ways to improve things, and so on. So I like moving things around, getting those different perspectives, and I think AI helps us do that faster and more efficiently.
Well, and I was noting to just pivot over to the topic of your customer zero team. Back a year or two ago, an article that you authored on the Ivanti website was about fostering that IT security, combining those silos, more collaboration between IT and security. And in the various strategies that you wrote about, strategy number 4 was become a customer zero. And, figure out if you prioritized features in your products over security. Tell me about your customer zero team and what have you learned from having one? It sounds like it's relatively new, or has it been around for a couple of years?
I would say at least a couple of years. Well, I think I learned a long time ago, unless you have the people in your own company aware of what we actually do as a company, right? And can those people go out to their next door neighbor or anyone and explain, our products, or even what it means, right? To use an Ivanti product. And so, I tell a couple of stories. The Apple story is obviously famous, where Steve Jobs said, "I'm getting rid of every typewriter in the company, and we're all going to use Apple, Macs." And that was a customer zero story that changed Apple, right?
Yeah.
I did work at SAP. I tell the story where at one point, the CEO of SAP, no names mentioned.
Everybody knows him. Yeah.
Well, Christian Klein is there now, and Bill McDermott was there when I was there.
That's who I was thinking of. Yeah.
Right. So, when the light bulb went on that SAP was using more of Oracle than HANA, okay, there was the big push to say, okay, we got to get rid of Oracle and have our whole SAP use HANA. And, I think that was a sea change for the company at the time, because, again, they weren't using and adopting their own product. So it's absolutely important to have a customer zero program in your company, because it builds loyalty and it builds ownership for what we do and what our customers are experiencing. Yeah. Okay. If we can't experience what our customers are experiencing, it just disconnects us more from their feeling, right? Because a lot of it's like, this is slow, this is not working. We need to feel that. We need to feel that, empathize more with that, and then push to get that fixed. And that's what our customer zero group, that's their mission. So we number one, want to know what's going on with these products. Number two, and more importantly, we do try to develop new ROI around our own products. And that's kind of brought AI together with our customer zero program. Yeah. We've implemented Ivy, right, our AI around ITSM, for instance, where we have AI now automatically.
Remind me again what ITSM is.
I'm sorry, it's our service management platform. Okay. Service management, ticket management. So what we've done is, as you know, the burden of a lot of operations folks, security people, et cetera, is managing all these tickets that come in. Something's not working. Can you execute this for me? Can I schedule something? It's a constant drumbeat of tickets. Now, those tickets obviously have to be triaged, routed to the proper silo, right, to get executed against. What we've done now with AI is we have AI categorizing the ticket, routing the ticket to the right organization or person. And then we're at that last stage now, where if there's a remediation that could be performed right away, we will automatically remediate that ticket. Okay. So that has all kinds of benefits, right? Because your mean time to repair, your MTTR, that drops considerably because we're fixing it almost immediately.
Interesting.
Right? Okay. Number two, by routing directly to the person that would be responsible for fixing that, that's also lowering your MTTR, because now we put it right into the place it's supposed to be, and they can work on it, get it resolved, customer happy.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yep.
And also what we're finding too is that, let's face it, we service thousands of customers. We're seeing redundant tickets. So, same problem.
Yes.
So because of that, we're able to categorize those tickets, into one ticket,
Yeah.
and then get that remediated, problem solved, less tickets, less volume, et cetera. So Customer Zero did all that.
Okay.
Right.
Yeah.
And now we push that back into our product folks, and that is part of the new service management platform that we will distribute to our customers. So really, being relevant, right?
Mm-hmm.
Producing something that has a real tangible value to the company. And then obviously we know how that's going to affect our customers. So win, win, win. So,
and don't do everything at breakneck speed, because you're not supposed to be breaking things and falling forward, especially when customers are counting on you for network security and endpoint management and all that. When you and I reviewed your strategic business and tech priorities going into next year, we mentioned secure by design, the fact that you do hear a lot about regulatory demands from the customers you talk to, and that ultimately it is all about data. And with all the talk we've done about AI, I remember a year or two ago, it was always talking about the data management platform or enterprise data management. Has AI pretty much subsumed all of that, or has it become a specialty spur in enterprise data management that's just attracting so much attention? Data, I think about our CIO 100 Innovation Awards program that CIO.com runs every single year. It's like a 38-year-old awards program. And over the last 2 decades, about 60 to 75% of the winners each year were usually some kind of cool data management fix that they were doing at their companies. I mean, that data management was at the bottom of so much. And sometimes I wonder, where did all that go? Do you have a chief data officer anymore?
we don't have a chief data officer. Okay. And as I said earlier, I think we created, data nightmare out there with all the different data marts, data silos. It has become difficult, right? Yeah. And look, it's clear that that's a problem, because look at all the data breaches we're having almost on a regular basis. Yet somebody's in the funny papers about, somebody accessed this PCI, that, what's going on? And what's going on is that there's been a definite dissemination of data throughout enterprises, and the control of that and the access of it, it was just too much, right? The scale of that becomes difficult, right? Sure. Yeah. Becomes difficult. So yeah, I think, as I said earlier, I think there is going to be a move to create a singularity around where data is stored, how it's managed, and as I said earlier, it's not a DBA anymore, right? You're having people that have to know how these models are created, what data is going in there. Now, look, let's face it, there's a lot of Kool-Aid out there from vendors about, you need to have this data mart with this layer to control access and so on. I think the jury's still out. That's my view of it right now. I think we need to take our time, because a lot of the modeling is still fresh, right? Yeah. So you don't want to, lean too far left or too far right. You have time. You do have time. So I think right now it's really understanding how to create that singularity of where the data is going to live, then developing the strategy for access. What tool does accomplish the very high level of scale that AI will bring to managing data.
Okay.
Right? Okay. It is a high level of scale. And, I do find that over my travels in the industry, that is the single most difficult skill for people to really make part of their portfolio or their resume. Scale kills. And if you can't manage it, you're in trouble. So you really have to understand, if it's here, but it's going to go to
Yes.
3,000, how do you amplify all your processes, your people, the infrastructure? If you don't have some concept of that level of acceleration,
Yes.
you'll make a lot of mistakes.
Yeah.
And those mistakes will finally come back and really cause some problems. So understanding that AI is a scaling function that will happen across your enterprise is definitely something you need to put in your calculus as you continue that journey and an understanding of how you're going to implement it.
Well, that's a good perspective and a good thought. I couldn't help but think when we were talking about all the data stuff that it's basically the nightmare on Data Mountain, where you've got data warehouses and data marts and data islands and data resorts, and I've heard them all called all kinds of stuff. It's a whole lot of fuss over those zeros and ones, isn't it? I want in our wrap up here, I want you to talk a little bit about what you have learned about your own leadership style over the last few years. You've had CIO positions in the past, but then a lot of running SaaS operations and being very customer focused. And now that you've arrived at this latest pinnacle in your 30 plus year career, tell us what you've learned, what you learned now that you wish you knew 20 years ago.
20 years ago.
Well, 10 years ago. I know.
I'm,
20 years ago is 100 in this industry. Yeah.
well, my career is a little bit. I spent 15 years actually in Europe.
Mm-hmm.
I worked for the Italian government, managing the whole, let's say, consolidation of the European stock exchanges and privatization of a lot of European companies onto those exchanges. And when I went over there, I learned a lot about what it takes to deal with different personalities. Okay. Obviously, my last name is Grazioli, so I was, I was an American, not an Italian when I went over there, which was
But I'll bet you were dealing with them in Italian.
un po', a little bit. Because a lot of things are in English there, right? It was a little bit easier for me being in the financial sector to deal in English. But my point there is, though, when I went to Switzerland or Germany or France and made those travels, technology was the least of what it took to get things done. It wasn't like, okay, well, at that time, Sun Microsystems and these kind of things were still around. And so my point here is that it was learning to deal with the people first, and not trying to just push the effectiveness of technology or what it's going to do. It was winning over people that wanted to travel with you, go on that journey with you, and getting that buy-in. Because once you got the buy-in, then it became easy to start to talk about what technology we're going to use, how it was going to be implemented, and what effect it was having. And because don't forget, over in Europe, unions have a big part of how things are done there. And that was a big learning process for me. I worked on Wall Street, where in Wall Street back then, people came and go just like that. It was, so the learnings are that people count, having people engaged, making them feel relevant in what we're trying to do as a team, as an organization, and continuing that no matter what the situation is. Don't lose those principles. Keep that as your guiding light on how you want to accomplish things. Don't make it all about what's the holy grail. No, it's about bringing people along, having them buy into what we're trying to accomplish, and then executing with those people. Because at the end of that journey, everybody feels good, everybody wins, and they want to continue to win. They want to stay on that winning formula with you. So because younger Bob was definitely, let's get it done, let's go.
Velocity. It was all about velocity.
Yeah, that's what counted. So, look, it's not that I don't, I think velocity is important. You want to get things done, but I also think in today's age, people are nervous. They're nervous about their lives, their jobs, and everything. And I think having a more, personal touch with people about what we're doing, why we're doing it, I think it settles that down a little bit, gives people more confidence in your organization that you know what you're doing, that
Yeah.
you are a leader, right? And that really helps. It really helps. One of the things I'm kind of proud of is that, that attrition number in any organization is always out there, and I pay attention to attrition. I take it personally when not that someone's leaving for a better job
Better
or,
job. Yeah.
but if they're leaving because, something in the organization wasn't clicking right, or there was a gap in communications, or those are the things I know you need to focus on as a leader.
Yep.
I know you need to reach out to people and make them feel included in what we're doing, how we're doing it. And again, make them relevant, make them feel relevant in what they're doing on a day-to-day basis. So
Good.
I think that's kind of where I landed after all these years.
Okay. Well, and that's another good answer. And I kept thinking one of my mantras is always keep on talking, keep on having conversations, and I hear so much more about communication and empathy from CIOs in the last few years that didn't used to be the focus. And it's nice to see such a great focus on people. And I think it'll be especially important going forward as AI becomes more of this gargantuan thing in our lives.
Oh, you're spot on.
Yeah. Thank you so much, Bob. It's been delightful talking with you today, and I appreciate you making the time.
My pleasure. It was great. Thank you very much. Thank you.
You're very welcome. I hope that you enjoyed today's conversation with CIO Bob Grazioli of Ivanti as much as I obviously did. This episode is the latest addition to our extensive library of CIO Leadership Live podcasts, where we have more than 140 in-depth interviews with prominent CIOs, all available pretty much as long as the internet lasts. We're going to keep those interviews up there at CIO.com and on CIO.com's YouTube channel. The show is also available as an audio podcast wherever you find your podcasts. Please take a moment to subscribe to the aforementioned YouTube channel, where in addition to dozens of conversations that I've had with US-based CIOs over the years, you can also find now several international spin-off editions of the podcast that feature senior IT leaders from Canada, India, New Zealand, and Australia. Thanks so much for joining us today, and we'll see you back here next time.